Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the My GBC podcast. Today, we are exploring the unknown, the yet to be created, and the newly innovated. And you might be asking, what does that even mean? Well, today we're talking about the Research and Innovation Department at George Brown College. And there's actually so much fascinating work happening right now as we talk at the college. And I actually had no idea about all of that. And I have a guest today that is going to help us understand what are the things that happen there. I'm joined today by Jillian Butler, who is the Knowledge Transfer Coordinator in the Research and Innovation Department, to talk about what she does, what are some of the most exciting projects currently underway. And so, hi, Jillian. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much. We're very excited to have you here. I was actually going through the script for this podcast. I'm preparing myself. And when I saw your role's name, which is Knowledge Transfer Coordinator, I was like, that's one of the coolest roles names I've ever heard. So I think you actually do a lot of really interesting stuff based on the name.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it suits me.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. I was like, I might actually be interested in that role. It sounds like very interesting based on the stuff that I read so far, but obviously we're going to learn more. To start, let's start like with you and what you do. What is your role at the department and what do you do on a daily basis?
It's a very good question. I To sum up, I tend to wear a lot of hats. So my
Okay.
day-to-day always looks a little bit different, which is why I
Mhm.
love it. Sometimes it's working on written materials like case studies, profiles, proposals, funding proposals. Sometimes it's running events or helping
Mhm.
to capture media like video or photography. A lot of proactive and reactive media production or collection. But I would say my main responsibility, my main ethos, if you will, in the broadest sense possible, is to support knowledge transfer and mobilization for our department. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it's taking the knowledge from this semi-academic research context and turning it into practical use for media, advocacy, awareness. And this has a lot of different audiences. Sometimes it's between researchers and the public. Sometimes it's between industry and community partners, business development and clients, grant writing, proposals, that sort of things, and government relations. It's basically positioning the work that our community does in a way that's universally understood. And a big part of this is, things like advocacy efforts, creating awareness of what we do here at the college. I think it's always said that we're sort of George Brown's best kept secret because we are very busy, we are very consistent, but perhaps we're not singing our praises from the rooftops as we maybe could.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually
Yeah.
had I always knew there's like research going on in different parts of the
Hmm.
college, but I didn't know that it's that extensive. So based on my understanding, you work with like almost all the centers and faculties that we have in school, correct?
Virtually all of them, yeah. And we certainly have historically as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
it is
Yeah,
fun. It is fun. Yeah, there's lots to talk about.
mm, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thought like I don't know, like when you hear research, I thought it's more like maybe more academic courses or programs that we have
Yeah.
in school. But when I was saying like you work with like culinary school or like even the
Mhm.
School of Design, so I'm like, that's actually very interesting. And I would really be interested to know like what kind of projects are going on for those, I guess, like centers that I didn't really expect to be in that list.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll talk
And
about that, I guess.
it's funny that you say that traditional idea of research. I also come from a traditionally
Mhm.
academic background, and uh, I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of research, but the kind of research that we're doing, it used to sort of be called applied research. Now we're
Mhm.
shifting more of a research and innovation because that is really what we're doing. We're making new things, processes, ideas, and we're taking them from an idea to a reality for industry, for our community
Yeah.
partners. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like all very interesting and very important work. But if we want to talk about you specifically, what excites you about the Research and Innovation Department the most?
It's a really good question. As you will find, I could talk about this subject for days.
Of course, yes.
Um, this year, my biggest project was, I believe you mentioned at the top, our annual report. It was my biggest project this year. We launched that. It's been a really long time coming. It's actually our first one that we've done officially. And
Mhm.
looking back over the year and some of our accomplishments, it fills me with a lot of pride. We have an amazing community with the research that's happening here at the college, and I feel so spoiled that I get to talk about it all day. And of course, my other staff members at the research department, they also help to make a lot of this happen. So, and like really, I think our portfolio speaks for itself.
Yeah.
We work with people who have an idea and they want to make it a reality, whether that's a new product, a technology, social initiative. Sometimes it's a large business who wants to test out an idea, basically rent a lab. So they come to us and they use our facilities and they outsource some of the R&D that they might traditionally do in their own labs.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's somebody working in their basement in their free time. It varies quite a bit. And we have the sort of capacity and facilities to work with all of those people. But I think maybe what excites me most is the people, the
For
students
sure.
and the researchers. I'm continually blown away by what they're able to make a reality, from
Hmm.
building robots or perfecting a new food product. And everything that we work on, everything that keeps us busy, it happens because someone had an idea. And to work with our industry partners who just have passion, who have the desire to make the world a little bit better through the ideas that they're working on. It's incredibly inspiring. And as I mentioned before, I did come from a very traditional research academic background. And what's exciting to me is how these two ideas live in my head. I still love doing, traditional research, employing all the sort of techniques and tactics that I learned there, but melding it with this very practical application of having a thing at the end of a project. So instead of, some incredible research, a project that took years and years, it's a thing that can be sold in a store. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. Like when you think about research every time, like I mean, at least for me, what comes to mind is that you sit down, like it's like desk research. You sit down, you come up with like ideas and you do a lot of research and you write like a paper. But
Hmm.
then mixing it with like the knowledge of the students and what they're experiencing and like actually making something out of it that is improving someone's life every day somehow, that I think is not only making it more exciting for the researcher, I would say, if I am
Hmm.
like, if I could be that student, but also like I think it's very practical and beneficial for the community as well,
Yeah, and
which
there's
is
a lot
very
of
cool.
ways for these two things to coexist. There's been some historical cases of people from traditionally academic backgrounds coming into our campus and, learning a practical skill to sort of supplement those more theoretical skills that they're learning at
Yeah.
a university or something like that. So I,
Mhm.
I I love to see that. I love when our projects are interdisciplinary, when someone comes to us to work on project X, but then they can also go next door and work with project B. Like it's so exciting to see the kind of synergy, the kind of inspiration that can come out of getting people in a room together and just seeing what can happen.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so now let's talk about like the department, I guess, a bit and the research that you do more specifically so people get to know what's going on. Based on what I've heard so far, it seems to me that like, obviously any college or university can only grow and benefit from such a research department. But specifically talking about our George Brown's research department, how long have you been operating here?
So, in its sort of first incarnation, the Office of Research and Innovation opened its doors in 2007,
Okay.
and the landscape has grown from then. Before then, I stand to be corrected, but I don't think that there was any funding for colleges before that. A lot of
Mhm.
the funding was sort of for that traditional university sort of based research model. So it only really existed from 2007 onward. And it was much more modest operation then, as you can imagine. Think I think it was less than 20 projects that first year. Um,
Wow.
and now we've grown to a place where we're regularly executing almost over 100 every year. And
Amazing.
that's sort of on the lower end. So, like, what do we do in a nutshell? We work directly with industry partners, community members to develop and test new services, products to the market. And the reason why this is so important is that we've seen year to year is that to stay relevant in a market that's always changing, industry needs to be nimble. They need to be able to pivot very quickly. They need to be able to follow their customers where their customers go.
Mhm.
And for smaller companies that don't have a dedicated R&D department or don't necessarily have the resources to contract one, that's really hard, if not impossible.
Yeah,
And honestly, the difficulty has been magnified by things like the COVID-19 pandemic,
yeah,
and things like that. So we've worked with over 1,800 partnerships since in this
yeah.
time.
Mm.
We've created over 17,000 student research experiences, and we've attracted 90 million in external funding. So that's kind of our model. We have funding that can support a lot of these projects. So, and it varies a lot from project to project, but we can help sort of offset the cost for a lot of our partners and take the burden of that R&D investment off of their shoulders a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we did. And then we work with faculty or researchers and
Mhm.
students, and these create sort of our research teams who then work with the industry and community partners to develop their ideas.
Mm.
And so all of our research revolves around themes, basically, that they will fall under. And our themes are textile and garment innovation, advanced manufacturing and prototyping, food and beverage, built environments,
Mm.
interactive and experiential design, and digital transformation.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I am always very upset by the fact that a lot of the funding goes to universities only. Although I actually firmly believe that there is a lot that could come out of colleges just because of, the different like things that are going on in college versus university. It's a different type of learning. It's a
Mhm.
different set of kinds of programs. And there is a lot of innovation that actually could come out of these more practical programs. But I'm glad that we have it now. And listening to you, and as you talked about like the amount of funding you've been able to receive, it sounds very promising. And it seems like with the speed of growth that you guys have had, it seems like in the next couple of years, it's going to be many, many more projects and many more students involved, which is really great. We were looking at the 2022-2023 annual report that you did just to kind of
Mhm.
prepare for this podcast. And we saw that you have worked with the construction and engineering department to research and develop smart green technology. So, just to familiarize, I guess, our students with the things that you do, can you tell us more about that and give an example of like a green technology projects that they have worked on?
Yeah, so a lot of our construction and engineering research sort of revolves around this idea of sustainability, about building back better. We're kind of at this juncture where there's a lot of technology exists, there's a lot of possibility, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of choice. So a lot of people want to make more sustainable decisions, whether that's in building a home or in choosing a product or choosing, sort of where to vote with their money and what to support.
Mhm.
You mentioned at the top our plastics recycling project.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a very cool one. And I learned a lot from it when we were sort of going through that process. So the name of the company is Plastic Flux. They're a startup based here in Toronto, and they transform black plastic into functional furniture by shredding it and then
Mhm.
forming it into sheets that are then made into other things. And
Cool.
their whole ethos is they want to divert trash away from the source and keep it out of the landfill.
Mhm.
And I had to learn this actually. You see, in Toronto, black plastic is not accepted in the city's municipal recycling program. And I think this is
Yep.
true in places across Canada. I believe
Mhm.
because the optic sorting machine that they use at the depot doesn't recognize black plastic because the
Yeah.
conveyor black is belt. So whenever you try to recycle black plastic, it's just going to end up in a landfill. And an
Mhm.
important thing to keep in mind, of course, is that plastics, even when it's recycled, has maybe 30 iterations in it. before it's going to get downgraded and it can't be recycled anymore, and it's going to end up in a landfill anyway. So a priority is making it into something useful, into something beautiful that won't have to go into a landfill in the first place. So keeping it out of the single-use plastic zone and into something much more sustainable. So they had sort of an open source design for this piece of very specialized equipment that came out of Europe. They have a collective over there. I think it's called the Perfect Plastics Cooperative, Precious Plastics. And so they released all these open source designs. And rather than try and get something shipped over from Europe, the company wanted to kind of keep it local and keep it sustainable and try and develop something here. So they came to our product development exchange. They do a lot of product development. And they basically built it for them here, but with a lot of customizations and additions that made it kind of even improved. The original open source design was more sort of hobbyist based. So if somebody wanted to kind of do this in their basement, and so our researchers were able to modify it so that it was a little bit more industrial strength and ergonomic. So it'd be
Yeah,
easier to work for longer periods of time, which was really cool.
it is very cool,
Yeah, we've done a
honestly.
couple of phases with them now, so I'm really excited to see where that company goes.
Yeah, I would love to see that actually. What was the name of the company again?
Plastic Flex, they're on Insta.
Plastic Flux. Okay, perfect. Yeah, amazing. That sounds very interesting. And just to kind of explain a term that you mentioned, I mean, I know it, I'm sure a lot of people know it, but you mentioned that it's an open source design. Can you just explain what that means?
Absolutely. So open source is a design that's basically in the public domain. You can use it, you can modify it, you can develop it. I believe you could put stipulations that you can't turn around and like sell the actual design. You can't pass it off as your own. But it's
Yeah,
basically just something that has evolved out of this knowledge economy that we're kind of graced with, where you have a lot of ideas and people are very excited about them. So rather than sort of keeping something to yourself, keeping a design to yourself, you're opening it up to a community.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very, especially for designers, it's a very important thing because it actually helps us
Absolutely.
save a lot of
Yeah,
money and actually have a better community because we're able to share and everybody can benefit from the knowledge that has
absolutely.
always been gained, which is
Hmm.
amazing. Yeah, okay, so that was a very cool project. But as we were exploring more projects, because I want to kind of mention the different things for people to get to know about them, you
Hmm.
also did the Finding Their Voices project, which was
Hmm.
really interesting. And you partnered with the Algonquins of Ontario and used photogrammatic actually, I don't even know how to pronounce it. How do you pronounce that? Photogrammetric?
Photogrammetric, I think.
Okay. So photogrammetric laser and immersion technologies to help uncover the lost heritage of the Algonquins of Greater Golden Lake First Nation. So can you explain to us what those terms mean? Photogrammetric immersion technology, what are they?
Yeah, so this was an amazing project that was led by Dr. Stephanie Adams, who's a
Mhm.
professor in the Architectural Studies program. And
Okay.
the whole idea of this project is about digitizing lost culture, heritage, language of the Algonquins of the Greater Golden Lake First Nation
Mhm.
through a technological process. So, sort of melding the historical with the present and using digitization to help in the conservation or preservation of, you know, old buildings, historical buildings, cultural important buildings. It's not new, but applying this sort of process to capturing Indigenous culture in Ontario is unique. And there's a lot of far reaching and historical implications of this project, which is why it's really exciting. So, the building that's central in the study is the Log Cabin. It sits on the territory of the Algonquin First Nation.
Mhm.
And I believe it's leased to some community members in the Deep River community. And they partnered with community members like the Deep River Library, the Deep River Yacht and Tennis Club, and then I think the property itself sits on land owned by the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. So yeah, that was a really fantastic project and very overdue work. So if you're interested in this project, please go seek out more information about it. I know the George Brown website has a really wonderful piece that's up there, and I'm sure that as this project continues, there'll be more information available. So like
Yeah.
I will give it, as they say, a college try. So as I understand it, photogrammetry is a technology that obtains information about physical objects or environments by the process of recording, measuring, and looking at photographic images. So
Hmm.
in other words, taking pictures, mapping out things digitally with laser scanning. If I'm not mistaken, it's sort of technically a very old process. I think the basic principles are kind of similar to like what Da Vinci and his cohorts were doing in like the 1400s. But the general idea is about getting information from an object, from taking photos, from taking measurements, from taking digital artifacts of an object from different locations
Hmm.
and angles. And through that process, through that technology, you can create a 3D digitization of, in this case, the cabin and its surrounding landscapes. And this is really exciting because obviously mapping out historical buildings in this way aids not only in preservation, but I feel like it sort of shapes how we situate ourselves within these historical spaces. And you
Yeah.
can kind of imagine like the applications that this kind of technology would have. You could create a virtual version doesn't that isn't limited by geographic barriers. So you or I could hop into this digital version and take a look around at this incredibly historically significant space.
For sure.
I mean, I really you should really get Dr. Adams on here to talk about it because I know she's incredibly passionate about this subject, and she's an
Yeah.
incredibly passionate speaker. So we should get her on here.
For sure. Yeah. And Dr. Adams, are they like a professor in the school
Yeah, I believe
or?
she's a professor in the
Oh,
architectural studies program.
okay. But do you have to be like a professor to get involved in one of these projects that your department does, or?
Not so it depends what the project is. Usually a lot of our PIs, so our principal investigators, are faculty, but our Ignite funding, which we
Hmm.
have, is open to anyone who works at the college, really. So
Okay.
if you
That's
the
amazing.
Ignite funding is a really interesting and exciting initiative that we're launching, or not launching, but continuing, where
Hmm.
if you have an idea, you apply and you can get, I think it's up to $30,000 for 2 years, and you can research your idea. And the sky is sort of the limit for what that idea is. We've had a lot of innovative applications of teaching and learning, a lot of investigations into how people learn. We've had, more technical programs, and a lot of people just sort of use it as a sandbox. So think of, you might have an idea for a project, but you're not quite sure if it's going to work. So you can apply to Ignite funding, play in your sandbox, figure out if this is actually possible, and then maybe pursue, a bigger project down the line. So it's sort of a testing ground for if your idea can be expanded into a bigger project. So it's really great
Yeah.
for first time researchers, honestly. If you're thinking of getting into it, it's a really good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. And you can be just a student, or do you need like the support of like a professor to be able to apply for this?
It's staff members, unfortunately.
Okay, it has to be a staff members. Okay. And you also worked with the culinary arts and textile arts and different things. And what has been one of the most memorable projects in your recent memory, and why was it really memorable to you?
I mean, I can't choose just one though. It's like
Okay, you
picking your
can name
favorite.
maybe two to three, if that
Fine.
helps.
Okay. I'll tackle a couple. So you mentioned culinary arts right off the top. This is
Yeah.
one of the most fun areas to talk about because who doesn't love food?
Yeah.
Our Food Innovation and Research Studio, aka FIRST for short,
Mhm.
they have been a technology access center for over 10 years now. So they have just so many wonderful success stories in their pocket. They work with clients to sort of troubleshoot their product development challenges and help them bring their new ideas to market. So you go into a grocery store, you pick something up off the shelf. You probably don't think about the work that it took to get on that shelf. And there's quite a bit of work that goes in behind the scenes in order for it to be on that shelf in Whole Foods or Loblaws or what have you. And I'd wager most people maybe don't think about that, but it's quite a long road. So you have to do things like shelf life testing. So you have to prove how long it lasts, which means you can have, an expiry date. You have to do things like nutritional facts, which is where you're breaking down things on a chemical level to figure out how much protein's in something, how many carbohydrates are in something. And even consumer sensory testing, which is where we well, not me, but the wonderful researchers at the first labs, they welcome people into their labs at our King Street campus, and they taste things and they kind of gather feedback from actual consumers on how things are tasting, how things are feeling. And that is something that anyone can sign up for. Actually, if you go to our website, georgebrown.ca/first, and you can sign up to be a sensory tester. I really
Oh,
recommend it. I have done it myself. It's really, really fun, and
nice.
you do get paid for it, so that's fun. And so all of these things go into a single product behind the shelf. So we've had a lot of people come through and sort of go through this process, and everyone's needs are a little bit different. But one of my favorites of recent years, and again, I'm not playing favorites. I love all of our projects equally, but was the sweetness sugar cookies. They're an Edmonton-based
Oh,
company, and they make these little sugar cookie kits that come with edible markers. And so they came to our facility to make changes to their product formulation, improve their shelf life, and develop some new products. And I can attest. I actually bought these for my own daughter, who loved them. So they've really cornered a very enthusiastic market. And
okay.
they're also delicious, so that's great. So you can actually draw and color on the cookies. So you can
That's so
see how,
cool.
yeah, but you can see how that would be a challenge to develop formulations for such a product, because there's a
For
lot of
sure.
moving factors that go in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, on our social innovation front, this was sort of a new area. Though, I didn't mention social innovation actually when I listed them all off, but social innovation is sort of a new, for us, area that we've been moving into in recent years. And it's really exciting because it really does span all of our capabilities here at the college. And they're basically working directly with community partners to bring new social initiatives to light. And one that actually just wrapped was the Job Talks Access program. This was run by Dr. John Gallagher from the Center for Business. And it was a project that investigated how the Canadian workforce works with people with disabilities and what are the needs of people with disabilities. And according to like a survey that was done in 2017 by the Canadian Survey on Disabilities, 6.2 million Canadians have at least one disability that might prevent them from fully participating in the workforce. And so what this project sort of aimed to do was investigate, well, what does that look like? What kind of accommodations should employers be doing? How can we help? How can we better navigate these challenges? And they sort of produce this into a final research report that contained a lot of recommendations. So that one has a really terrific website that I encourage anyone to look up, jobtalksaccess.com. A lot of really amazing, amazing stuff there.
Yeah, for sure. And we can have all these links in the show notes as well, so it's more accessible for everyone to find them. But wow, honestly, diverse fields,
I could go
diverse
on.
projects. I mean, I'm sure you can, but it's very cool. As you were talking, I actually just realized that I recently did a project in collaboration with George Brown and another organization. I'm not going to name them yet because apparently it's a still secret till we actually launched a product. But I didn't know that that's actually the same department. I recently worked with you guys, and it's a very, very cool project that is going to be launched soon. So follow the George Brown Instagram, and you can see a lot of these projects, I guess, showing up there. But very cool. I'm just realizing what you guys are, and I might have actually known you all this time. I just thought I didn't know. But very cool.
Yeah, like what our office does is really we facilitate these projects. It's, the researchers and the students who are doing
Yeah.
amazing, amazing work.
And I guess one more very important question for a lot of students listening to this podcast would be, how can they actually get involved in these research projects? Yeah.
Yeah, well, to make a long story short, virtually all of our projects are paired with George Brown students, or at least we try. That's kind of our ultimate goal. It's an
Mhm.
amazing opportunity for potential employees to interact with potential employers inside of this really cooperative workspace. And
Mhm.
we see, it's team driven, it's focused, and it's a really great environment to apply the things that you're learning in the classroom in a real world setting. And so you're not learning how to be innovative, you're living it, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term. Yeah.
Mhm.
So this happens in usually one of two ways, either as part of the curriculum. So a student does a capstone project or does it as part of their classwork, or we recruit the students directly to work a part-time job, basically, where they're working directly with industry to
Okay.
work on these projects.
Amazing. And can it also like be in a form of like an internship, or is it usually like a part-time kind of job?
Um, Sometimes we just started doing more work with a funder called MyTax, and they definitely position
Yeah.
this as more of an internship
Mhm.
approach. So a little bit more long term. But it takes a lot of forms, and so there's no really way for me to generalize because we have so many projects that span so many areas that there's no one answer. It sort of really depends on where the project is coming from and what that process looks like.
Mhm. And so when somebody says that I need students to help me with this project, how can students learn about these? Is it going to be on our like career website, or is there a different way of applying for these positions?
So they're usually when we recruit students, it's almost always in the direct field of study. So the best way to get
Mhm.
involved is to ask your professors if, they're doing research or if they're involved in research, because that's usually where the opportunities come from.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you mentioned that like the research projects usually are like kind of related directly to their coursework, right?
Well, usually. So if we have a design project, we're going to be looking for students who work in one of the design programs with one of the disciplines that would be appropriate. If you're doing a
Hmm.
capstone project or a project as part of your curriculum, then obviously it's going to be related to that field of study.
Yeah.
Occasionally, there are things like the consumer testing and other opportunities where maybe it's less guided by what the particular thing that you're studying, but usually it's going to be in the field that you're studying.
And do you have like any stories, maybe like of specific students that
Mm.
you knew that like they got involved in a project and how the project worked out for them?
We've had a ton of students who go on to really amazing things, and often with the partners that they've worked with, which, it seems like a no-brainer. Many of these projects involve creating a new technology or service, so who better to maintain them than the people who built them?
Hmm.
One of my favorite student stories is actually from a couple of years ago. So, but it's been really fun to sort of watch this grow and evolve. It's Jeremy Capone, who started as a student in, I want to say, the culinary and wellness management program diploma,
Hmm.
and he worked on what was called at the time the Brunch Project, which was a
Okay.
collaboration out of Princess Margaret that developed recipes for colorectal cancer patients. So
Mhm.
I feel like at the time it was a few years ago now, and it was sort of before we were really thinking about the ways that we eat influencing our health to such a degree that, if you're suffering from X, maybe look at eating Y. So this was quite innovative at the time. So he was working on this project as a student, and he's since gone on to actually become the host for their kitchen series, which is an online and in-person cooking show that
Mm.
hosts a series of cooking demonstrations for different. He works with a registered dietitian, and they show off how to make healthy recipes that are always designed to sort of be accessible. So, it's one thing to say eat more leafy greens. It's another to actually incorporate them into a meaningful way in your diet if you've never done that before. But they really look at making these recipes in a way that people can actually relate to and actually incorporate in meaningful ways into their diet for cancer survivors and cancer patients. So
Mm.
I thought
Yeah,
it's a really inspiring story, and he's doing really great work over there, and I was able to
sure.
attend a taping, and just the
Mhm.
engagement, people were really responding to it and really engaged, and yeah, and I feel like really an extension of what he worked on as a student, and it's really inspiring.
Yeah, that's definitely very inspiring. And it sounds like for the students who are like planning to work with this department, it sounds like there is like room for growth. Like it doesn't have
Mm.
to end with you graduating from the school. Obviously, there is opportunity for you to grow after that and make something really amazing out of the project that you started as a student.
Well,
Um,
it's such a great opportunity to showcase what you're capable of.
yeah,
It's I always think of it as sort of, a resume plus. It's one thing to
for
say,
sure.
"Oh, I learned this, this, and this," but it's something really special when you can point to a project and say, "Well, actually, I developed that." And
True,
so
exactly. I guess like we briefly talked about this, but just to reiterate, if a student has an idea or an interest in a project area, how can they get involved in the research and innovation department?
well, you can always email us. Our email is research@georgebrown.ca, to see
Mhm.
how you can get involved, and ask your professors if they're involved, ask around, see if you can find any opportunities, but yeah, the best way to indicate you're interested is to reach out to us.
Okay, yeah, we can have that email in the show notes as well, so people can go ahead and email you if they have any questions or they have any ideas. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jillian, for coming
Thank
onto this
you.
episode and sharing all of this fascinating information with us. As I said, this was definitely a very inspiring episode for me. And I hope it was as inspiring as it was for me for everyone else as well. And just be sure to keep your eyes on the Research and Innovation Department and check their website, see what is going on. And thank you, everyone else, for listening to this podcast. Maybe one day soon you'll be buying or using one of the products that was developed at our own college. But until then, if you have an idea of your own or just want to explore something further, make sure that you head to the Research and Innovation webpage listed in our show notes. Thanks again, Jillian, and have a good day and take care.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.